Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Today's video is why does the US map have so many pointy bits? It is a losty. I've just realised my hair is sticking up so much, guys. I'm so sorry about that. It is a losty. His links are in the description as always, but please wait till after this video to check him out. If you could like and subscribe, that would mean a lot to us. Yeah, it would. It makes us smile when we see those subs going up. Yeah, why do they have so many pointy bits? I don't know. Lawrence, tell us.
America, what is it? It's a country with 50 states, and it's also a map enthusiast's dream because all across this great nation there are oddities, like those places where you have to drive through Canada to get there, or that place in Kentucky that's not attached to Kentucky. And there's also a phenomenon in many parts of the country known as panhandles, but not those kind of panhandles. I'm talking about geographical panhandles. And people who aren't from America might be thinking, Lawrence, what on earth are you talking about? And not because the rest of the world doesn't have this geographical quirk, it's just that everywhere else in the world, this geographical oddity is known as a salient, which is a salient point. Know that. No. This might explain why, when I first moved to the United States, I didn't understand it when my wife's cousin Chad said, "My folks are from the Florida Panhandle." I just assumed that he had relatives who were chefs. And that's a pretty good assumption to make about Americans, especially since the American map has a collection of states that are shaped like a chef holding a frying pan containing what could be fried chicken in the outline of Kentucky. Perfect. And yes, just like I did with my patrons during
fried chicken is not a bad thing to be shaped like, I'm telling you.
Sunday's secret live stream. You could go state by state and find weird different shapes. Massachusetts looks like a firearm. Texas looks like a pair of underpants after my dog got involved. And Nevada looks like a razor blade. You could do that, but when we're talking about panhandles, we're not talking about literal panhandles. We're talking about something that America has a lot of: thin stretches of land that emanate from a larger piece of land. So in Florida, it's quite hard to tell which part is the panhandle. I've always read that it's the part that doesn't contain the fun stuff like Disney World and Kennedy Space Center and Miami and Florida Keys. So why am I talking about these now? Did you not have panhandles when you lived in Britain? While examples of salients do exist in Britain, they're just not as spoken about as they are in America, and I think the reason for that is that they don't have a quirky name like panhandle, and so no one's interested. But also because they're just not as prevalent, and I think that's a shame, because one of my favorite things about American panhandles is that they're sort of like those warp whistles from Super Mario Bros. 3, which I realise is quite a niche reference for those that have never played Super Mario Bros. 3. But basically what warp whistles allow you to do is bypass one world en route to another world. Where are you going with this, Lawrence? I've no idea. Instead, let's ask me from 2 years ago. Basically, from Stratford, Texas, there is a route to Elkhart, Kansas that magically takes you through 5 massive states in about 3 hours. Texas, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Colorado, and Kansas. As a British man in America, I've had to come to terms with many things. Drive-through pharmacies, unlimited refills. So why is America so obsessed with panhandles? Well, I'm glad you asked, because not only do panhandles come in all shapes and sizes, but all of America's panhandles have different origin stories. Every now and again, when I want to cure my cell phone addiction, I head to a state known as West Virginia, where I can't get signal. West Virginia is an oddly shaped place. Whenever I look at it, I see one of two things. Either it looks like somebody's swearing with their hand, but in American, or it looks like Salvador Dali painted a tea.
I think it looks like a roast chicken, like a rotisserie chicken. Like, and that's the back legs. I don't know, maybe I'm just always thinking about food, that might be why.
Pot. I actually made this point a few years ago on Twitter, and amazingly somebody who was running for office in the state shared it with her constituents. I don't know if she got elected, but if she did, I'm taking 2% of the credit. But whatever you think it looks like, there's probably a reason that you do, and that reason is that it has not one but 2 panhandles. It's greedy in a way. There's this clingy one that seems to be jealous of Ohio's relationship with Pennsylvania, and then the spout to the east, which is where I assume people in Virginia get their tea. Why does it have these? Well, it's complicated. Basically, it looks like West Virginia used to be a part of Virginia, and Virginia got into an argument with Pennsylvania. We've all done it. And this was over which state owned a particular portion of land. And so they reached a compromise. And in that compromise, Virginia ended up with this little area whose border is made up of the line that makes southwest Pennsylvania and the Ohio River. Also, I'm in my dressing gown because I got sick midway through this video. Live with it. And then the other bit where the T comes out of, that apparently came about when the western portion of Virginia seceded from Virginia to form West Virginia and formed a boundary with existing counties and a natural boundary with the Potomac River, which we're going to hear more about later. So this makes me wonder if other salients emerged in similar ways. So with that in mind, allow me to manhandle some more panhandles. God, that sounded better in my head. And that brings us on, I suppose, to the Florida panhandle, which I noticed something about a few years ago.
It is a bit weird, that the Florida one, because it's almost like they both could be panhandles. Like, technically they both could be.
That brings us on, I suppose, to the Florida panhandle, which I noticed something about a few years ago. Even though Florida is technically on the East Coast, the westernmost tip of the panhandle is almost, not quite, but almost due south of where I am right now in Chicago. Let your brain do with that what it will. All that to say, this panhandle has some ridiculously complex history, which goes a little bit like this. First, the area was controlled by the Spanish, who subsequently lost it to the British during the 7 Years' War, which didn't last 7 years, but the 6 years, 8 months, 3 weeks and 3 days war would have been a mouthful. And at this time, them pesky redcoats split Florida into West Florida, which is the panhandle, and East Florida, which is the fun stuff. But after the Revolutionary War, which was a rubbish time to be British, Spain took it back. However, after Napoleon, seen here, portrayed by River Phoenix's brother, sold the Louisiana Territory to the US to fund his wars against, you guessed it, the British, Spanish Florida became isolated. So in 1821, they ceded the land to America, who sort of grandfathered in Britain's definition of Western Florida, and my wife's cousin Chad hasn't shut up about it since. I've talked about this one before. Texas and Oklahoma have two ridiculously rectangular rectangles, and nobody knows how they got there, unless they've read a history book. You see, believe it or not, Texas, which is 2.8 times the size of the UK, used to be bigger. I mean, it used to be the size of Jupiter. Look at it. And apparently had the mothership of all panhandles. But it was also a slave state. So what happened during something called the Missouri Compromise, it prohibited slavery in the Louisiana Territory, but only in parts of the territory which were north of the 36th degree 30 latitude line. Not only does this line form the southern border of Missouri, except for this little whatever that is, panhandle? Boot heel. All right, thanks, John, on Patreon. But today, thanks to that compromise, it splits the borders of the Texas panhandle and the Oklahoma panhandle. And that's because the compromise made it so that Texas would give up its land north of that line and also to its west in New Mexico. This is how it ended up with that giant square, in case you thought my dog actually ate it. And now, Nebraska. Nebraska has this little panhandle, which would not be easy to fry with. Well, Nebraska also used to be a bloody large place, about the size of 2 motherships from Independence Day. But around the time of the Civil War, the US Congress was like, you can't have all that to yourself, but in an American accent from then. Give some of it to your siblings. I suppose Nebraska didn't deserve mountains. However, Idaho did. I know that because I've bloody seen them. And its panhandle seemed to come about through, guess what?
I kind of like it though.
Previously, it was the Idaho...
The Idaho panhandle makes me think of an eye, so I kind of know it's Idaho whenever I see it.
Territory, and once again it was massive, about the size of Galactus, until there were a lot of disputes. Montana wasn't happy, Washington wasn't happy, and they're like, no, Idaho, you're not going to be this massive rectangle, even though this is America. You're just going to have this part which looks like a piece of cheese that somebody took a bite out of. And is that accurate? Idaho. Alaska is a US state today, but once it belonged to Russia. And so America bought it from Russia, as you do, but its southern panhandle there was left undefined. And that's because there were mountains there, and mountains are confusing. And so Canada, who rightly wanted access to the sea, began disputing land ownership with America, which presumably was just training for 2026. But Canada eventually accepted the American definition, which doesn't bode well for next year, and the Alaskan panhandle was born. And then we ended up in Maryland, which honestly has like 3. But it seems like this western bit is what everyone talks about. And apparently this one came about because the Maryland panhandle borders the Potomac River. And apparently, this was something I learned today, in 2021, when presumably we were all distracted by the pandemic, West Virginia tried to annex Maryland's panhandle because they wanted a bigger teapot. And not for the first time.
That is not very nice sharing. Not very nice.
has been rejected by America. The annexation failed. And Maryland is still shaped like a bad haircut. Finally, we have Connecticut, who, can we really call that a panhandle? It's
I
more
guess
like a
it is
robot's
tiny
nipple.
one.
Either way, it came about through a border dispute again. New York and Connecticut were like that over who should own this piece of land. And eventually, New York said, look, Connecticut, you can have it, so long as we can have an equivalent oblong, which was named the oblong, in an exchange that could only happen in a country that's obsessed with rectangles. And
Yeah.
apparently, panhandles, which I've learned today, only came about because of border disputes and rivers. Anyway, let me know in the comments below if you live in a panhandle.
Let me know in the comments below, guys, if you live in a panhandle or you've been to a panhandle before. Let me know in the comments below. Laura's link in the descriptions as always, and have a fantastic day, guys.